Welcome to Twilight Terror Stories. Twilight is not just the end of day, it's the beginning of something else. A time when the shadows stretch and fear takes its first breath. You've stepped into that moment now, and the stories are waiting. Let them find you. The carriage gave a sudden, violent heave, and their heads, all three, snapped backward with the chilling precision of marionettes yanked by a single string. In that fractured second, the mundane tapestry of my late-night commute unraveled. Hundreds of times I'd ridden the 1145 Leviathan spitting sparks from Boston toward New York's maw, yet never had I witnessed such unnerving synchrony. From my customary seat, third row from the carriage's terminus, exhaustion weighing heavy on my eyelids after a day drowned in corporate jargon, I watched them. The overhead fluorescents stuttered, painting their faces in strobing chiaroscuro. They occupied the far end, a tableau of absolute stillness disrupted only by those perfectly mirrored reactions. My phone cast a pale glow. 1:17 a.m. The car echoed with emptiness, save for myself, the unsettling trio, and a pair of indistinct forms slumbering mid-carriage. Providence had bled past the windows moments ago, leaving only the hypnotic rhythm of steel wheels devouring track. I wrestled my attention toward the laptop's glare, but my gaze kept snagging on them. Two men, one woman, draped in identical, severe business attire. Their posture defied natural ease, spines unnaturally straight, shoulders squared at congruent angles. When the train swayed through a curve, they tilted as a single entity, bound by some invisible, rigid framework. A glacial dampness slicked my palms against the keyboard. Paranoia, I chided myself, a phantom conjured by fatigue. Tend to your own affairs. But then one head pivoted, a sharp, ratcheting motion, and fixed its stare directly upon me. The face, it wore the mask of humanity, but the eyes triggered a visceral recoil deep in my gut. Glassy, unblinking orbs like a doll's, set within skin too smooth, too taut. My gaze crashed back to the screen, my heart a frantic drummer against my ribs. Beads of sweat prickled my brow despite the carriage's artificial chill. A primal urge screamed to flee, to find another car. Yet my limbs felt leaden, anchored by an unseen weight. Deceleration bled into the train's rhythm. The next station approached. Footsteps echoed down the aisle, measured, deliberate. I kept my head down, refusing to look. A hand clamped onto my shoulder, fingers digging with surprising strength. "Don't react," a low voice rasped, frayed with urgency. "Don't look at them. When we stop, you leave with me." I risked a sideways glance. A man, perhaps in his late 50s, close-cropped gray hair stark against a battered leather coat that had weathered more than just storms. His grip held firm. "What?" I began, barely a whisper. He cut me off. "Their movements are wrong because they are wrong. You saw it, didn't you? That clockwork motion. Stay aboard this train, and New York becomes a destination you'll never reach." The train groaned, slowing further. Through the grime-streaked window, the skeletal lights of Kingston Station materialized. My thoughts fragmented, racing. This stranger, a potential threat himself, yet the raw fear harmonizing with absolute conviction in his tone resonated deeper than logic. I darted a look toward the trio. They were standing now, converging on the aisle with that same flawless, disturbing coordination. Their motion was fluid, yet fundamentally alien, like watching a film reel spun at an incorrect, unsettling speed. "Now!" the stranger hissed, hauling me upright. I snatched my laptop bag, abandoning my suitcase to the overhead rack. As we surged toward the door, other footsteps sounded behind us, closing fast, maintaining their perfect, unnerving cadence. Before the train had fully surrendered its momentum, the stranger wrenched the emergency door lever. A blast of frigid air assaulted us as he shoved me toward the gap. "Jump!" Instinct usurped thought. Gravel bit into my palms as I hit the embankment, tumbling. The stranger landed beside me, pulling me roughly to my feet. "Run!" We scrambled away from the tracks toward the desolate platform. Behind us, a single, resonant impact, 3 pairs of feet striking the ballast simultaneously. The sound was wrong, too heavy, like iron striking granite. "Don't look back," the stranger panted, his breath pluming in the cold. "Whatever happens, keep your eyes forward. Don't see their faces now." Lungs burning, we sprinted across the empty concrete expanse and burst into the station building. The fluorescent tubes overhead buzzed with neurotic energy in the profound quiet. A bleary-eyed station agent glanced up from his phone, startled. "Lock the doors," the stranger commanded. "Call the authorities." The agent merely gawped, bewildered. I turned, compelled to look through the glass doors, and froze. They were advancing toward the station, a phalanx of unnatural grace. Their faces, bile surged in my throat. The skin had shifted, grown translucent, waxy, like tallow under moonlight. Their eyes were mirror pools reflecting the sterile station glare. The stranger yanked me down behind a row of hard plastic seats. "Stay down," he ordered, producing something from his coat pocket. A compact metal cylinder etched with cryptic sigils. The automatic door slid open with a pneumatic sigh. 3 pairs of feet entered, their steps falling in exact, unnerving unison upon the tiled floor. Click, click, click. The sound amplified in the enclosed space. "What are they?" I whispered, the words catching in my dry throat. "Later," he retorted grimly. "Survival first." The footsteps drew nearer. A faint, high-frequency whirring accompanied them now, the hum of intricate machinery spooling up. The station agent, finally grasping the wrongness, pushed himself upright, mouth forming a question. "Get down," the stranger roared. Too late. One of the figures reached for him, its arm elongating impossibly, fingers unfurling into metallic tendrils. The agent let out a strangled cry as they clamped around his throat. The stranger leapt up, aiming the cylinder. A piercing sine wave flooded the air. The 3 figures halted, heads swiveling toward us with that hideous mechanical exactitude. "Cover your ears," the stranger bellowed. He twisted a dial on the cylinder. The tone escalated, becoming an acoustic scalpel that vibrated through bone. I clamped my hands over my ears, a futile gesture against the overwhelming sound. The trio began to shudder violently. Their skin rippled, then tore like wet paper. Beneath the peeling facade, a nightmare of gleaming chrome and pulsing bioluminescent wiring writhed, a grotesque fusion of the organic and the artificial that screamed impossibility. The agent crumpled to the floor, scrabbling away as the creature released him. The 3 figures, entities, abominations, were coming apart. strips of their counterfeit flesh sloughed off, revealing more of the intricate horror beneath. The stranger held the cylinder steady, his hand unwavering despite the tremors I saw rippling through his arm. The pitch shifted again. The creature's movements turned spastic, their coordination shattered. One lunged erratically toward us, its mouth gaping open to reveal concentric rows of spinning needle-like teeth. A sound tore from it, neither human nor machine, a high-frequency screech that vibrated in my fillings and blurred my vision. The overhead lights exploded in a shower of glass. In the ensuing dimness, punctuated by emergency lighting, I saw arcs of blue energy crackle across their exposed frameworks. They were disintegrating, components clattering onto the tiles. "Stay behind me," the stranger ordered, advancing cautiously. He kicked aside a fallen piece, a hand, its metallic fingers still twitching, grasping at his boot. The creatures executed one final synchronized contortion, heads snapping back at an anatomically impossible angle. Then they collapsed, a final shower of sparks and a scattering of inert metal. The agonizing tone from the cylinder ceased, plunging the station into a ringing silence. The agent huddled in a corner, emitting soft, whimpering sounds. Weak emergency lights cast long, dancing shadows over the wreckage. "What?" I croaked, my throat raw. What were they? The stranger was already pulling another device from his coat. Small, black, resembling a remote control. He pointed it at the scattered debris. Smoke began to rise as the components sizzled and melted. "Hunters," he said at last, his gaze fixed on the dissolving puddles of dark, viscous fluid. "Showing up on transit lines, anywhere they can isolate prey. They mimic us, but the fine motor control, it's always slightly off. That's the tell." "Hunting what?" I asked, a cold certainty settling in my stomach. "Us." He turned, his expression etched with weariness. "They harvest, study, refine their mimicry. These were an older model. The newer iterations are much harder to discern." The station agent, fumbling with his phone, finally managed to dial. The stranger strode over, flashing some kind of identification I couldn't quite make out. "Federal oversight," he stated, his voice regaining a measure of calm authority. "This incident is classified. A containment team is en route for cleanup and debriefing. Until they arrive, this station is sealed." The agent nodded mutely, phone lowering. The stranger returned to me. "You're clear for now, but you need to come with me. There are things you must understand, and we need to confirm you weren't tagged." My eyes traced the patterns of melted ruin on the floor, the shattered glass, the scorch marks marring the walls. My reality had fractured irrevocably in less than half an hour. "Why me?" I asked. "Why save me?" "Because you saw," he replied. "You perceive the dissonance beneath the facade. Most people rationalize it away, ignore the subtle wrongness, but you didn't. That makes you vulnerable, or valuable." He gestured toward the exit. "Coming?" I glanced back through the glass doors toward the tracks. Far in the distance, the train's taillights winked out, swallowed by the night. If I hadn't jumped... "Yes," I said, my voice steadier now. I followed him. Outside, the night air felt sharp and clean against my skin. A canopy of indifferent stars glittered above the deserted parking lot. He led me to an unmarked black SUV. "Safe house is about an hour out," he said, unlocking the doors. Full briefing en route. "First, though, tell me precisely, what was the very first thing that registered as wrong?" I recalled the jolt, the instantaneous, unnatural reaction. "Their heads," I answered. "When the train lurched, they snapped back together, like puppets." He nodded, turning the ignition. The engine purred to life. "Good, sharp observation. We need that." "Need it for what?" "For the resistance," he said, his tone flat, devoid of melodrama, "because their mimicry improves daily, and the number of us who can still perceive the difference dwindles." As we pulled onto the highway, I saw flashing lights approaching in the rearview mirror. Dark vehicles, official-looking, the cleanup crew arriving to sanitize reality. 1,000 questions clawed at my mind, but I remained silent, watching the ribbon of dark asphalt unspool before us. My existence had been irrevocably altered in that train car the moment 3 figures moved incorrectly. Now, hyper-awareness was a physical sensation. I found myself scrutinizing the gait of distant pedestrians, the minute gestures of passing drivers, searching for the subtle tells separating the authentic from the imitation. The stranger, Silas, he eventually told me his name was, drove with practiced vigilance, his eyes constantly flicking to the mirrors. Fear should have been paramount. A desperate plea for normalcy my only thought. Instead, a strange sense of alignment settled over me, as if I'd stumbled through a hidden door into the world as it truly was. "Try to rest," Silas advised. "Tomorrow, the real education begins. Recognition, evasion, defense, survival." I leaned my head against the cool window but didn't close my eyes. The passing landscape, familiar houses, darkened storefronts, seemed overlaid with a new, unsettling filter. How much else was merely a convincing performance? The world appeared unchanged, yet my understanding of it was fractured beyond repair. Now I knew. Sometimes the feeling that something is subtly, fundamentally wrong isn't imagination. Sometimes the monsters are real, masters of camouflage woven into the fabric of the everyday. The SUV devoured the miles, carrying us away from the station's lingering horror and deeper into a clandestine reality. Behind us, the night train continued its inexorable journey toward New York, and I wondered how many others aboard might notice a flicker of wrongness in a fellow passenger's movement, and if any of them would be fortunate enough to have a hand reach out from the shadows just before it was too late. The missive arrived on an afternoon drained of color, materializing unheralded in my mailbox. A brittle envelope addressed to me, Elias Thorne, in a precise, almost archaic script. Within, terse sentences conveyed an inheritance. An alpine chalet, bequeathed by relations so distant they existed only as faded names in family lore. Nothing was expected from that branch, severed long ago by silence and geography, yet the ink was stark, the meaning plain. I was now master of a solitude high in mountains I'd never breathed the air of. Curiosity, perhaps, or the lure of potential gain. Whatever the catalyst, it propelled me. A bag hastily packed, the city dwindling in my rearview mirror. I reached the ascent as the sun bled its last light behind serrated peaks. Above, the sky bruised indigo and slate. The air, sharp as chipped ice, bit at my exposed skin. The chalet clung to a ledge overlooking a shadowed valley, a skeletal frame against the fading light. Its wooden steps gaped, paint peeled like sunburnt skin, and the roof, hunched and uneven, hinted at breaches. Shutters hung askew, fractured. A ragged carpet of weeds and desiccated grass formed its yard, bisected by a faint path suggesting infrequent passage, contradicting the letter's implication of recent vacancy. Near the porch, I silenced the car's engine. The quiet that rushed in was absolute, unnerving. No birdsong, no sigh of wind through pines. A vacuum. Slinging my bag, I ascended the porch steps. Each plank groaned its protest underfoot, releasing puffs of scent. Aged timber. Settled dust. The key, included with the letter, grated in the lock. The door resisted, catching halfway, demanding a shoulder's thrust before yielding entry. Darkness pooled inside, relieved only by weak lozenges of light from grime-coated windows. My fingers traced the wall, finding a switch. A lone overhead bulb sputtered, casting epileptic shadows down a narrow hall. The walls wept damp, staining the paper, and the air hung thick with the smell of slow decay. My shoes disturbed the fine silt on the floorboards, leaving clear prints. Then a jolt. Other prints, not my own. Sharper, newer impressions marred the dust, leading away towards a room off the right. I followed, entering what must have been a sitting room. A stone hearth dominated one corner, its maw choked with cold ash. Opposite slumped a dilapidated sofa, flanked by spectral chairs. The alien footprints tracked directly into the room's heart, vanishing near the fireplace. A prickle traced my nape as I stooped, examining the disturbed dust. Someone, something, had stood precisely there. Yet no prints led away. A knot tightened low in my gut. Depositing my bag on the sofa's threadbare surface, I sought more light, finding none. I circled a room. Shelves bore forgotten books, tarnished knickknacks. Everything wore a shroud of dust, save for peculiar streaks wiped clean across surfaces for no discernible reason. My fingers brushed a shelf. Dust clung like a second skin. A soft thump echoed behind me, wood on wood. I spun. Empty air. My first night began in stillness. Upstairs, I claimed a small bedroom, marginally less dust-laden than the rest. My suitcase found a perch on a chair. I cracked the window, inviting a sliver of frigid air, and stripped the bed of its musty linens. A hollow expectation lingered, finding remnants of lives lived, photos, letters. But the drawers yawned empty. The closet held only a few moth-ravaged jackets. A corner lamp cast a feeble, jaundiced glow. Around midnight, a crackling roused me, the distinct pop of burning wood. The air had warmed. Sitting bolt upright, I saw it, a faint, flickering luminescence from downstairs. Heart hammering, mouth dry as parchment, I retrieved my flashlight and crept down the complaining stairs. The glow emanated from the sitting room. Turning the corner, I froze. Flames writhed in the hearth where only cold ash had lain moments before. The logs looked freshly placed. Heat pulsed against my skin. A frantic scan of the floor near the fireplace confirmed it. The footprints I'd seen earlier were obliterated, replaced by scattered ash and wood splinters. Someone had been here, had built this fire, Tremors started in my hands. I seized the poker, stirring the embers, seeking an explanation that wasn't there. After minutes spent watching the hypnotic dance of flames, I retreated upstairs, leaving my bedroom door ajar. Sleep, when it came, was shallow and fraught. Morning found me stiff-necked, head throbbing dully. The hearth below was cold again, a tomb of gray ash. Outside, the sun ignited the peaks in breathtaking splendor, yet the beauty felt alien, overshadowed by unease. No forced entry was apparent. Windows intact, doors secured, save the front one I'd unlocked myself. I resolved to chart the chalet's remaining territories, hunting for clues to my unseen visitor. 2 floors and a cellar comprised the structure. Upstairs, beyond my temporary room, lay 2 others. One, a study, a desk littered with yellowed papers, chairs askew, a towering bookshelf crammed with tomes bound in decaying leather. The papers spoke of boundaries, deeds, familiar ancestral names whispered in childhood stories. A note detailed moisture damage, necessary repairs. Nothing hinted at a recent occupant, a caretaker. The adjacent room housed a gallery of portraits. Darkened varnish obscured details, yet the figures in their stiff, formal attire exuded a chilling presence. Their expressions were uniformly blank, their eyes possessing the unnerving quality of following my movements. Drawn to one, a man whose jawline echoed my grandfather's, I noted the stern set of the mouth, the direct, painted gaze that seemed to pierce through time. A coldness bloomed in my chest. My hand brushed the frame. It shifted slightly on its nail. Downstairs yielded a kitchen and cramped dining space. Appliances, relics of a bygone era, stood silent. Cabinets hoarded dusty tins and crockery untouched for decades. In the dining room, a long table stood sentinel, its cloth stained, the air thick with the ghost of old meals. One chair sat pulled away from the table, angled as if recently vacated. The tension in my chest returned, sharp and insistent. As afternoon shadows lengthened, the urge to flee warred with the stubborn compulsion to remain. This place, unsettling as it was mine now. And the mystery, who walked these floors? A squatter? Or was my isolation breeding phantoms? The basement beckoned. Its door, near the kitchen, groaned open, releasing a wave of musty air. A single bulb illuminated descending stairs. The space below wasn't large, a workbench strewn with tools, crates stacked like forgotten memories. My flashlight beam swept the concrete floor. No footprints here, but metal hooks hung from the ceiling joists, grim and suggestive. More boxes occupied a corner, labeled with dates and names, family names. Opening one revealed brittle photographs, letters, keepsakes thick with dust. Faces stared up from faded images, their expressions distant, unnervingly similar to the portraits upstairs. An unsettling weight settled in my stomach. These relics felt less like history, more like an obligation. I lingered below longer than intended. Twilight had deepened when I emerged. Hunger gnawed. I scavenged a can of soup, coaxing a reluctant flame from the ancient stove burner. I ate standing, leaning against the counter, straining to hear any sound beyond my own breathing. The chalet held its breath. That evening, I lit candles in the sitting room, the overhead bulb's flicker becoming unbearable. Their flames cast wavering, elongated shadows. My gaze kept returning to the empty hearth, the memory of its spontaneous fire raising goose flesh, I resolved to stay awake, vigilant. Around 9, a faint, dry scrape sounded near the front door. My heart lurched. I moved cautiously to the hall. Nothing. The door remained shut, the dim bulb casting its weak light. Then, from above, a low groan, the unmistakable sound of weight settling on a loose floorboard. Fists clenched, I tilted my head back, half expecting a face to peer down from the landing's shadows. Only darkness regarded me. My pulse throbbed in my ears. Ascending the stairs felt like trespassing, each step amplifying the house's creaks. Reaching the upper hallway, I felt a distinct chill draft. The door to the portrait room stood ajar, though I was certain I'd closed it. Inside, the painted faces watched from the gloom. My flashlight beam crawled across them, then snagged on something on the floor. Faint impressions in the dust, the shape of bare feet. They led directly to one portrait in the far corner, a stern, middle-aged man. My stomach coiled as I approached. The footprints terminated abruptly at the wall beneath the painting. Reaching out, my fingers found the frame's lower edge. It tilted forward. Behind it, nestled in the wall, was a small concealed compartment. Swallowing hard, I pushed the portrait fully aside. Inside lay a leather-bound journal and a tiny, ornate key on a loop of twine. The journal's cover felt stiff, cold. Flipping through brittle pages, I scanned lines of unsteady script. Family secrets, oblique references to old traditions, recurring mentions of the family's debt. One sentence leapt out. He must return here when the time is right. My hand trembled. Pocketing the journal and key, I turned. Another creak echoed down the hall. The door to the adjacent room seemed to nudge inward, a minute shift as if stirred by unseen breath. I stared, heart pounding, then forced myself away, needing air. Downstairs, out onto the porch. The night air was crystalline, biting. My breath plumed wide. I gazed at the immense, dark silhouettes of the mountains, thoughts racing. Who lit the fire? Whose spectral feet trod these floors? What debt did this journal speak of? The chalet felt possessed of a quiet, watchful sentience. No animal calls, no distant lights. Just me and the unsettling presence brooding behind me. After composing myself, I retreated inside, locking the door, checking windows obsessively. Back in the sitting room, I sank onto the sofa, attempting to regulate my breathing. The candles guttered low. I retrieved the journal. Its pages chronicled unsettling phenomena. Footsteps, disembodied voices, furniture rearranging itself. The writer spoke of an old promise demanding fealty. Reading his words, a strange calm descended, the calm of shared experience across time. Then, a dragging sound from overhead, heavy, deliberate, like a chair been pulled across floorboards. I surged to my feet, nearly upsetting a candle. Flashlight in hand, I bolted upstairs, calling out, "Is anyone there?" My voice sounded thin, swallowed by the corridors. Silence answered. In the study, the chair I'd noted earlier had been moved. It now sat squarely in the middle of the room, facing the doorway, an expectant sentinel. The dusty seat remained undisturbed, but the floor around its legs showed fresh scuffs. Retreating, I locked myself in my bedroom, placing the journal on the nightstand, the small key tucked beneath my pillow. Lying rigid in bed, I listened. Every settling groan of the house became a footstep, every gust of wind a whisper. Sleep was a thin veil, easily torn. By the third night, the atmosphere had thickened, grown palpable. Objects shifted with greater frequency. Doors I'd firmly closed stood open. Footsteps echoed from empty rooms. The fireplace rekindled itself twice more at unpredictable hours. I existed in a state of heightened alert, sweating despite the pervasive chill. Faint whispers seemed to curl at the edge of hearing. Nerves, or something more? The portrait's eyes felt heavier, more insistent. I kept the journal near, rereading passages, seeking patterns. Those who inherit must answer the call. What call? I only knew I was profoundly not alone. Something in this house sought acknowledgement. On the fourth night, near 2 a.m, the rattling began. My bedroom doorknob. It turned, slowly, deliberately. The old lock held. I sat frozen, breath caught in my throat. After agonizing seconds, the rattling ceased. Soft footfalls receded down the hallway. In that moment, the truth solidified. This presence was not passive. It was here, just outside my door, waiting. I remain in the chalet. Leaving feels impossible now, not until I decipher its demands. The nights intensify. The evidence of an unseen cohabitant mounts daily. In the rearranged objects, the breathing floorboards, the palpable weight of its attention. It doesn't feel entirely malevolent, but possesses an unnerving insistence. It waits, I sense, for understanding. What that understanding entails, I do not know. But a chill uncertainty grows. The chalet, and whatever resides within it, will not release me until I find out. The city air hung thick and hot the afternoon Elias hauled his life into the old apartment building. Sweat slicked his brow, tracing paths through the grime of the day as his suitcases scraped protests across the scarred parquet flooring. An aroma, ancient and cloying, met him the moment he breached the threshold. A composite of settled dust, the damp ghost of mildew, and crumbling plaster. He shrugged it off initially. The rent was a bargain, a rare find nestled in the downtown pulse where convenience was king. His initial inspection had revealed the expected flaws of age. Fine veins spiderwebbing across walls, paint flaking near the ceiling like sunburnt skin, bedroom floorboards lying uneven as old teeth. Nothing screamed anomaly. Not for a structure breathing history. Possessions found their corners, the computer desk claimed its territory, and Elias resolved to sublimate the musty air, seeking only the solace of stillness after the move. Later, as dusk bled through the windows, a sound disturbed the quiet. A faint, dry scraping from the living room. Elias froze mid-step in the hallway, head cocked, listening. Silence answered. He moved toward the living room, his gaze sweeping the space. Curtains, heavy and drawn, muted the light, casting the far wall in shadow. A flicker, a brief distortion at the edge of his vision as he entered, dismissed almost instantly as a trick of the waning light, perhaps a car passing outside. Moving day jitters, he assured himself. Sleep proved elusive that first night. The apartment possessed a quietude that felt unnatural, profound. Only the rhythmic torture of a dripping faucet in the bathroom punctuated the silence, a persistent metronome counting away the dark hours. Eventually, Elias rose, padded into the small tiled room and wrenched the faucet tight. Turning, a shape imprinted itself against the dim hallway light filtering through the doorway. A silhouette, stark and unexpected, standing just beyond the threshold. A startled gasp escaped him. His hand slapped the light switch, flooding the space with harsh illumination. The hallway stretched before him, utterly vacant. Adrenaline surged, a cold fire in his veins, his breath coming in short, sharp bursts. Exhaustion, he told himself firmly. Just exhaustion playing tricks. The following week unfolded under a growing acoustic strangeness. Sounds materialized from the apartment structure. Delicate, furtive tappings within the walls. Short, sharp creaks that seemed to follow him down the hallway. Inexplicable clicks near the baseboards like tiny mechanisms winding down. Elias began patrols, searching each room for the mundane culprits, pests. Yet no droppings appeared, no shredded paper, no evidence of intrusion. Mr. Davies, the landlord, had mumbled something about the building's venerable age, but nothing concerning rodents. It happened late one afternoon. Elias on his knees scrubbing the kitchen linoleum. A whisper, intimate and chillingly close, brushed his ear. Less a voice, more an exhalation of sound, almost beneath the register of hearing, originating from directly behind him. He spun around, the wet rag slipping from his grasp. Nothing. The fine hairs on his arms prickled. His pulse became a frantic drum against his eardrums. Surely a draft, he reasoned, the wind finding some unseen crack near the window. A flimsy shield against the unsettling intimacy of the sound. Elias had never trafficked in ghost stories, always anchoring himself to the bedrock of logic, the explainable universe revealed by science. Yet an undeniable wrongness permeated this space, a persistent dissonance he couldn't shake. At unpredictable moments, his peripheral vision would snag on a dark form slipping through a doorway, fluid and quick. Or a shadow would detach itself from the wall and glide across the plaster, independent of any light source, even when he knew he was utterly alone. Each instance brought a familiar clenching in his chest, a tightening vice. His eyes would dart, scanning corners, peering into crevices, seeking a tangible intruder. Had someone else retained a key? The thought prompted a precautionary lock change. It altered nothing. The furtive sounds persisted. The phantom movements continued their unsettling dance at the edges of sight. He sought refuge in activity, organizing shelves, rearranging furniture, imposing order on the space. One afternoon, hammer poised to drive a nail, a distinct coolness brushed past his left side, a pocket of chill in the otherwise still air. No window stood open. The air conditioning remained dormant. He froze, hammer aloft, muscles locking. He held his breath, waiting. The cold spot lingered, palpable for a drawn-out moment, before dissolving as inexplicably as it had arrived. He finished hammering the nail, his hand trembling slightly, noticing fresh beads of sweat gathering on his forehead despite the temperate day. Nights became ordeals. Around midnight, low thuds would begin, muffled impacts from within. The walls, as if something were patiently knocking. Sometimes he'd turn on the television, hoping the electronic chatter would drown it out. But the flickering screen only seemed to heighten his awareness, making the movements glimpsed from the corner of his eye more pronounced. Once, roused by these sounds, he rose to investigate the hallway. As he approached his bedroom door, a soft, shuffling sound whispered from the other side. Hand hovering over the knob, he took a slow breath and pulled the door open. Emptiness greeted him. He flicked on the hall light, its glare illuminating nothing but the worn runner and faded wallpaper. His arms felt heavy, fingertips tingling with suppressed tension. "Hello?" he whispered into the vacant space. Only silence answered. One evening, curiosity overriding caution, Elias ventured into the small storage room tucked away at the hall's end. A single, naked bulb cast weak light from the ceiling. Here, the walls seemed older, bearing deeper stains, the air thick with dust. A broken chair listed in one corner amidst decaying cardboard boxes. He poked through the detritus, uncovering yellowed newspapers decades old, their headlines silent on any past tragedies or alarms. He searched for signs of squatters, any indication someone might be surreptitiously sharing his space, but the door locked securely from the inside. Then, without preamble, the light bulb overhead sputtered, flickered violently, and died. Plunged into absolute darkness, Elias fumbled for his phone, a surge of panic tightening his chest. The phone's beam sliced through the blackness. As he swept it across the room, his breath caught. Near the far corner, something seemed to crouch. A dense, black shape, devoid of features, an outline against the deeper shadows. He recoiled, heart slamming against his ribs. As the light beam settled fully upon the spot, the shape simply wasn't there. He backed out of the room, pulling the door shut, his retreat hasty. In the days that followed, Elias wrestled with reason. Exhaustion, he argued internally. Stress manifesting as sensory illusion. Perhaps the apartment's inherent creepiness was seeding his imagination. Yet, the pervasive sensation of being observed gnawed relentlessly. Mundane moments became fraught. Brushing his teeth, he'd feel phantom eyes on his back. Rinsing, he'd meet his own gaze in the mirror, only to catch a flicker of movement in the reflection behind him. A swift turn revealed only the bare wall, the half-open bathroom door. His pulse would spike, breath catching, a temporary numbness prickling his arms. He experimented with sleeping under the glare of overhead lights, a desperate measure. It proved counterproductive. The harsh illumination carved the room into stark contrasts, breeding deeper, more active shadows in the corners, shapes that seemed to writhe and shift whenever his gaze swept past them. And sometimes, from the hallway just beyond his door, the whispers would return. Not words, but faint, sibilant breaths, hushed murmurs on the edge of perception. He'd rise, press his ear against the cool wood of the door, straining to decipher them. Clarity never came, only the unsettling conviction of a presence inches away. After a few nights of this, he stopped opening the door to the whispers. He would simply stand there in the dark, breathing shallowly, until the sounds faded back into the apartment's brooding silence. He invited his friend, Liam, over one Saturday, craving an external perspective, a reality check. Liam arrived that afternoon, surveyed the apartment with a wry grin, and made predictable jokes about it belonging in a horror film. He reported hearing no taps, seeing no spectral movements. He shrugged, suggested Elias was overworked and sleep-deprived. Yet, Elias noticed Liam occasionally casting uneasy glances toward the ceiling corners. Liam admitted feeling an odd draft that raised the hair on his arms, but attributed it to the old building's poor insulation. When Liam left, Elias felt a confusing mixture of relief. He hadn't entirely fabricated the draft, and profound isolation. Liam's dismissal solved nothing. That night, the familiar repertoire of sounds and shadows resumed. Sometimes, lying in bed on the cusp of sleep, he'd hear it. A distinct scraping sound from beneath the floorboards. It was the stomach-churning sound of nails being dragged slowly across wood. The first time, he bolted upright, flicking on the lamp, standing exposed in his boxers, straining to pinpoint the source. It lasted only agonizing seconds, then ceased, leaving only the ringing echo of his own accelerated heartbeat. He tried rapping his foot against the floor, listening for a response, feeling for vibrations. Nothing. He crawled back into bed, lying rigid, eyes wide open, staring into the darkness above. His anchor to reality felt increasingly tenuous. Was this place truly safe? Small incongruities became magnified sources of anxiety. The way the bedroom temperature would inexplicably plummet for minutes at a time during the night. Finding the closet door slightly ajar when he was certain he'd closed it firmly. One morning, his keys, habitually hung on a hook by the door, were lying squarely on the kitchen counter. He searched his memory, trying to recall moving them, but found only blankness. By the third week, a permanent knot of tension resided in his neck and shoulders. His appetite dwindled. He took to walking late at night, escaping the apartment's confines for the anonymous bustle of the city center. The noise, the lights, the sheer volume of people offered a strange comfort. He'd linger in coffee shops until closing time, postponing his return. But the apartment always waited. One night, deep into the small hours, around 2 a.m., a sound cut through the quiet. 3 distinct knocks, sharp and deliberate, sounded on the living room wall near where he lay on the couch, courting sleep. He scrambled to his feet, marched to the wall, and pressed his ear against the cool plaster, his pulse a frantic thrum in his skull. He hesitated, then knocked back 3 times, mimicking the pattern. Silence. He turned away, frustration mixing with fear. Then, immediately behind him, right where his ear had been pressed moments before, came a single, decisive knock. He spun around, nearly losing his balance, a strangled gasp lodging in his throat. An icy chill mapped his shoulders. "Who's there?" His voice was a low, unsteady tremor. The silence that answered was absolute, heavy with implication. After that night, his habits shifted. A small lamp now burned perpetually in the hallway, and his bedroom door remained slightly ajar, small concessions to the encroaching dread. It minimized the shadows, perhaps, but the sense of presence lingered, undimmed. Leaving for work each morning brought a profound, almost giddy rush of relief, a temporary parole. He found himself inventing reasons to stay late at the office, burying himself in projects, anything to delay his return until exhaustion demanded it. One Thursday evening, the accumulated tension reached a breaking point. He needed to know if Mr. Davies knew more than he let on. He called the landlord, whose voice immediately took on an edge of annoyance at questions about the apartment's history or previous tenants. "It's an old building, Elias," Davies had grumbled, "bound to have its noises, perfectly normal." He flatly denied any reports of anything unusual. Elias didn't press, but asked permission to check the basement. Davies, likely eager to end the conversation, agreed curtly, providing a key and instructions to be brief. Flashlight in hand, Elias descended the creaking stairs. The basement air was cold, thick with the smell of damp concrete and decay. Patches of mold bloomed on the walls like dark continents. Dust motes danced frantically in his flashlight beam. He swept the light over old pipes, forgotten storage boxes, the detritus of decades. He found nothing overtly sinister, yet the feeling of being watched was immense, a palpable pressure on his back. He found himself whipping around every few seconds, heart hammering, beam cutting through the stagnant air. 10 minutes felt like an hour before he retreated back upstairs, locking the basement door behind him. That same night, seeking distraction in a book on the couch, the living room lamp began an intermittent flicker. Soft, furtive footsteps sounded overhead, though the unit above was supposedly vacant. Mr. Davies's assurance now felt thin. Around midnight, a distinct creak echoed from the hallway, the sound of a door opening slowly. Elias rose silently, crept to his front door, and pressed his eye to the peephole's distorting lens. The hallway outside was empty, bathed in the dim glow of the safety light. And then he heard it again, that faint, sibilant whisper, impossibly close, seeming to emanate from the very wood of the door against his face. A violent jolt shot through him, nearly buckling his knees. His pulse hammered, a wild bird trapped in his chest. His hands began to shake uncontrollably. He stumbled back from the door, his mouth suddenly dry as dust. He stood there in the middle of his living room for a long time, frozen, listening, until the silence reclaimed the apartment once more. Nearly a month has been consumed by this place. The shadows still writhe at the periphery of his vision. The whispers surface at unexpected moments. Whenever the thought of leaving solidifies, the crushing reality of the city's rental market pushes back. This place, for all its terror, is cheap. He clings to the mantra. It's in your head, it's stress, it's the old building. But the constant grinding tension in his body, the ache deep in his shoulders, the way his stomach clenches at every random shuffle or creak, these feel undeniably real. Sleep comes in fractured shards, punctuated by knocks, clicks, and the occasional disembodied whisper near his bed. He wishes for resolution, for a neat explanation he could grasp. He hasn't found one. He still performs his nightly rituals, checking corners, flicking lights on and off, a hunter seeking prey he cannot define. No face has materialized, nothing solid, but the movement persists, elusive and undeniable. And lately, something new. Touch. A fleeting pressure against his arm, the back of his neck, brief and cool like phantom fingers. When it happens, his vision momentarily blurs, his breath hitches. Is he losing his grip? Or is there truly something here, an entity operating outside the known laws of the world? His phone remains perpetually within reach. A part of him, the scientist he used to be, yearns to record the sounds, capture objective proof. But the thought of playing back a disembodied whisper, of giving it permanence, tightens his stomach into knots. He fears what he might hear, fears the confirmation more than the ambiguity. He is weary, bone-weary of jumping at every sound, of the constant second-guessing of his own senses. Yet, beneath the fear, a sliver of morbid fascination remains. The chilling possibility that something truly inexplicable resides within these walls. Tonight, Elias sits on the couch again, this chronicle sprawling across his laptop screen, an attempt to exorcise the thoughts by naming them. The lamp on the side table casts a steady, warm glow. The kitchen yawns, dark and silent. The bathroom door's closed. He wears a hoodie, warding off a localized chill that clings to his arms. His hearing is unnaturally sharp, tuned to the building's nocturnal symphony of creaks and groans. His gaze flicks constantly toward the hallway entrance, anticipating the slide of a shadow. His heart gives a nervous flutter with the refrigerator's hum. The click of the aging air conditioner kicking on makes him tense. No whispers yet tonight, but the night is young, and experience tells him they might come. He doesn't know how much longer he can stay. The apartment is eroding him, leeching his peace of mind day by day. His skepticism, once a sturdy fortress, now lies breached, buried beneath the weight of daily, inexplicable experience. He wants to believe in faulty wiring, old pipes settling, the projections of a stressed mind. But alone in the deep quiet of the night, the hairs on his neck still rise. Those fleeting shapes still dart in the corners of his eyes. Those soft, insistent clicks still emanate from the walls. This was never a story he imagined himself living, let alone telling. Yet here he is, caught in its unfolding, waiting for a climax, a resolution that never seems to arrive. For now, coping is the only strategy. Doors locked, keys close, phone beside him as he tries to sleep. Peace is a distant memory, but sanity remains a shore he desperately tries not to drift away from. If something shares this space, it hasn't inflicted physical harm. Not yet. It merely reminds him, night after relentless night, of its presence, lurking just beyond the veil of sight. And Elias is left perpetually wondering, waiting for the moment it might finally decide to step fully into the light. The digital voice, chipper and utterly devoid of irony, declared, "You have reached your destination," precisely as my headlights illuminated nothing but a tangle of weeds choking a dirt track that vanished into the brooding embrace of a mist-shrouded forest. That was the primary tremor of wrongness. The secondary arrived with the dawning realization that the preceding hour had been utterly devoid of fellow travelers, human habitation, or even the rudimentary comfort of a road sign. Yet, the full, gut-wrenching significance of being adrift didn't truly coalesce until I rolled into the peculiar, time-lost hamlet itself. My name is Elias. Order, meticulous planning. These are the cornerstones of my existence. But that Friday, dissolving into dusk, saw a rare deviation. A colleague's description of a quaint countryside inn, a haven whispered to be perfect for weekend dissolution, had lodged itself in my mind. Impulse, sharp and uncharacteristic, struck. A hastily packed overnight bag, an address tapped into the navigation system, and a highway unspooling before me. The initial hours were a balm. The city's concrete arteries yielded to suburban capillaries, then finally bled into undulating fields kissed by a sunset bleeding fierce oranges and tender pinks across the heavens. A nascent thrill, the promise of the unknown, stirred within me. This fragile buoyancy began to dissipate as asphalt surrendered to increasingly fractured pavement, the lanes narrowing like constricted throats. My electronic guide offered placid reassurances, yet a seed of doubt took root and spread insidious tendrils. Could this neglected path truly lead to a sought-after retreat? When the triumphant arrival announcement echoed in the desolate middle of nowhere, certainty fractured. I attempted a retreat, but the encroaching twilight rendered every tree-lined passage indistinguishable from the last. My phone, a useless brick for miles now, offered no lifeline, no digital map to salvation. Panic began its cold constriction as the fuel gauge's warning light pulsed, a malevolent orange eye in the dashboard's gloom. The last gas station, passed with casual confidence over an hour ago, now seemed a distant, irretrievable oasis. Just as the grim prospect of a night spent cramped and cold in my car solidified, pinpricks of light punctured the distant darkness. Relief surged, potent and intoxicating. Habitation. As I drew nearer, the lights resolved into a small town. A welcoming sign, weathered to near illegibility, stood sentinel. Through the decay, I could just discern the name. Milhaven. Unfamiliar, yet utterly welcome. All I craved was fuel and perhaps a room. Any room for the night. I navigated the main thoroughfare at a crawl, absorbing the strangeness. An unsettling stillness permeated the air. The architecture was archaic, profoundly so. Structures seemingly lifted from daguerreotypes. No neon glow, no familiar corporate logos, not even the regulating pulse of a traffic signal disturbed the tableau. Despite the scattered lights I'd glimpsed, the streets themselves were spectral voids. I eased up beside what appeared to be a fueling station, its pumps standing like rusted, forgotten totems in the swirling mist. A bell above a door chimed faintly as I exited the car, the sound swallowed by the oppressive quiet. No attendant emerged. Rust bloomed across the pump casings. The place exhaled decades of disuse. "Hello?" My voice felt obscenely loud. "Anyone here?" Silence answered. The door to the adjacent shop was firmly locked, its windows obscured by a thick film of grime, resistant inspection. A shiver traced my spine, unrelated to the evening chill. This place was fundamentally wrong. Retreating to my car, I thumbed the locks, the click echoing unnaturally. Someone, anyone, had to exist here. Someone to provide coordinates back to the known world. Deeper into the town I drove, past facades with shuttered windows and houses sunk in profound darkness. It possessed the curated perfection of a film set, meticulously antiquated but chillingly lifeless. Then a beacon, light spilling from the windows of what resembled a small diner. Hope, sharp and desperate, flared as I parked and hastened towards the entrance. A bell above the door jangled, admitting me into a space immaculately preserved from the 1950s. Crimson vinyl booths gleamed, tables shone with chrome trim, and the floor stretched out in a crisp black and white checkerboard pattern, a scene plucked directly from a time capsule. Behind the counter, an elderly woman stood poised, clad in a starched uniform crowned by a jaunty paper cap. Her smile reached me, yet an indefinable quality beneath it sent ripples of unease across my skin. "Welcome to Millhaven, dear." Her voice emerged, thin and crackling like static from a vintage wireless set. "You look turned around." Wariness prickled as I approached the counter. I am, severely. My navigation system led me wildly off course. I was just hoping for directions back to the highway. The woman's smile stretched, revealing an unnerving expanse of teeth. Oh, we don't get many passers-by in Mill Haven. Not anymore. Why not take a load off? Have a slice of pie. We can sort out your bearings once you've had a little rest. Every nerve ending screamed, flee. But the need for information was a powerful anchor. I slid into a booth, observing her as she moved behind the counter, humming a discordant, tuneless melody. A plate appeared before me bearing a wedge of cherry pie. Visually, it was flawless, yet its aroma was subtly discordant, cloyingly sweet, laced with an unidentifiable, faintly chemical undertone. I appreciate the offer, I managed, nudging the plate fractionally away. But I'm not really hungry. If you could just point me towards the highway, I'll be on my way. The smile vanished, her features solidifying into a mask of sharp displeasure. Now, that's hardly courteous, is it? After I went to the trouble, refusing my pie. The bell over the door jingled again. I twisted to see several figures entering the diner. Their movements were stiff, almost puppet-like, their faces curiously blank, eyes distant and unfocused. They arranged themselves deliberately, forming a silent barrier between my booth and the exit. Panic surged, thick and suffocating. Look, thank you for the hospitality, truly, but I really must leave. I pushed myself upright, but the woman's hand darted out with startling velocity, clamping onto my wrist. Her grip was vice-like, inhumanly strong, her skin feeling cool and oddly waxy against mine. I'm afraid that won't be possible, dear, she stated, her voice now utterly stripped of its earlier warmth, flat and final. You see, Millhaven doesn't get many new faces, and we do so cherish new faces. The figures who had entered were shuffling closer now, their locomotion jerky, unnatural. Under the diner's stark fluorescent glare, their skin possessed a strange, synthetic sheen. Adrenaline detonated within me. I ripped my arm free with a violent wrench and lunged for the door, shoving past the advancing forms. Cold, unyielding hands scrabbled at me, but momentum carried me through. I sprinted to my car, keys fumbling, the sound of the diner door swinging open again echoing behind me. The engine caught with a desperate roar. I slammed the car into gear, tires screaming on the worn pavement as I fishtailed onto the street. Glancing in the rearview mirror, I saw figures emerging from doorways all along the block, converging, all moving with that same horrifying, stilted gait. They flooded the road behind me, arms outstretched as if to physically tether my escaping vehicle. I careened through the town, blindly taking turns frantic for an egress. Each street was a mirror of the last, every building a perfect, unnerving replica of mid-century Americana. It was like being trapped inside a malevolent snow globe. Just as despair threatened to consume me, I saw it. The spectral, faded welcome sign I'd passed earlier. Beyond it lay the dark, tree-hemmed track that had been my entry point. I stomped on the accelerator, the car bucking violently as it hit the rutted dirt. Branches clawed at the windshield as I plunged into the forest-concealing darkness, fleeing the waking nightmare. For what felt like hours, I drove, heart hammering against my ribs, startled by every shifting shadow, perpetually convinced that the next bend would inexplicably loop me back into the heart of Millhaven. Only the sight of official highway signage allowed the crushing tension in my chest to ease, permitting a ragged breath. The charming B&B remained an unvisited fantasy. I drove directly home, my hands trembling on the wheel for the entire journey. As dawn painted the sky with forgiving light, I finally pulled into my own driveway and collapsed against the steering wheel, tears of sheer, unadulterated relief streaming down my face. In the days that followed, I sought answers. I pored over maps, digital and paper, plumbed the depths of online archives, contacted regional historical societies. No record existed of any town named Milhaven in that area. It was a phantom. Sometimes, in the quiet solitude of late night, doubt whispers. Perhaps a hallucination born of stress, a waking nightmare conjured by exhaustion. But then my eye catches the inert screen of my GPS unit, and I remember its confident, disastrous guidance into that abyss. And I can't help but wonder how many other errant travelers it has steered towards Milhaven's silent streets. How many failed to find the way back out? I rely on paper maps now, clinging to the certainty of well-marked routes. Because I understand, with chilling clarity, that while not all who wander are lost, some coordinates on this earth mark places best left undiscovered. And occasionally, the most terrifying destination is the one meticulously absent from any chart. This parcel of earth became mine only a month past. Little expectation had I nursed, seeing the faded "for sale" sign askew by the dirt track leading in. The dwelling itself is diminutive, clad in a pallid paint now flaking away like sunburnt skin. At the property's far reach stands the barn, canted somewhat, yet appearing sound enough for rudimentary storage. Within its shadowed confines, the previous occupant bequeathed antiquated tools, splintered crates, and a galaxy of dust motes dancing in the gloom I've yet to disturb. My aspirations were simple. Evenings spent watching the sun bleed behind the western hills. A sprawling cornfield, unfurling beyond the barn, held the core of my interest, a potential, however modest, for yield. Yet something arrested my gaze during that initial promenade through the rustling rows. There, precisely at the field's heart, stood a figure wrought of straw. Its vestments were tattered undeniably, but possessed a disquieting orderliness. The jacket collar rested primly against its neck pole. The trousers defied gravity's sag, the hat perched with intention rather than chance, as if tended, adjusted by unseen hands. Initially, I dismissed it. Merely a relic, I reasoned, left by custodians long departed. On that first exploratory day, I ambled past it. The effigy seemed to lean forward, just slightly, its burlap countenance angled toward the farmhouse. A peculiar coldness coiled in my gut, its origin obscure. It was, after all, naught but straw and timber lashed together. Its face, fashioned from faded sacking, showed tufts of its stuffing poking through. For eyes, black buttons served, though one was fractured, leaving a jagged void. A mouth, stitched in coarse thread, formed a crooked, silent line. A fleeting glance I gave it, then continued my walk. Inert it remained, motionless, a fixture upon the land. Several nights later, ensconced in the living room, I sought repose. Summer's warmth lingered, prompting open windows. Through them drifted the sound of wind breathing through the corn. Ordinarily a tranquil, sibilant whisper. That night it felt altered, imbued with a strange rhythm, akin to hushed susurration. No distinct words, just a faint, persistent cadence that raised the fine hairs along my arms. Drawn by unease, I stepped onto the back porch, surveying the field. Moonlight, wan though it was, silvered the swaying tops of the corn, and there, amidst them, the familiar silhouette stood stark, the scarecrow's form unmistakable. Squinting into the gloom, I entertained a fleeting, chilling notion. It seemed turned towards me. Not merely leaning, but pivoted fully. Darkness and distance conspired against certainty. I fought the feeling down, attributing the accelerated thump in my chest, the shallow catches of my breath, to fatigue. Retreating inside, I secured the door, murmuring reassurances. Cloth, straw, wood, nothing more. Sleep eventually claimed me on the couch. Dawn broke, and before venturing to town for provisions, I resolved to inspect the field. My boots crunched on the dry earth as I navigated the rows. Reaching the center, I confronted the scarecrow once more. Yet an undeniable wrongness permeated the scene. Its hat canted further askew, angled with unnerving precision towards my path. The arms seemed drawn closer to its torso, a subtle shift in posture. I stood transfixed for several heartbeats, a bead of sweat tracing my temple despite the morning's cool air. Hesitantly, I reached out, my fingers brushing the dusty fabric of its jacket. The sleeve stitching felt fragile, loose. I examined the post, testing its firmness in the soil. All seemed superficially normal. Then I saw them. Prints marring the dirt around the scarecrow's base. Not mine. These were smaller, scuffed impressions, as if left by dragging feet. They led away from the effigy, vanishing abruptly into the dense tangle of stalks and roots. A wave of nausea washed over me. Wind, perhaps, or local youths engaged in mischief. Yet the property felt utterly deserted. No sign of children, no sounds of intrusion. In town, provisions acquired, I exchanged pleasantries with a few locals. The property, they confirmed, had lain vacant for 2 decades at least. No one uttered a word about a scarecrow. None mentioned peculiar footprints. I held my tongue, wary of being branded paranoid within my first week. Evening found me again on the porch, the setting sun igniting the clouds in hues of orange and rose. Insect song filled the air, mingling with the dry, papery scent of corn husks. A powerful urge arose to stride out and confront the figure in the field, but prudence prevailed. The memory of those anomalous prints festered, dissuading any nocturnal excursions. Daylight seemed wiser. Around 10, the house secured, I retired, leaving a window slightly ajar for the night air. Sleep, I hoped, would be uninterrupted. But near midnight, I startled awake. A remote rustling, more insistent, more forceful than wind alone could explain, emanated from the field. Rising, I peered out. The moon, now brighter, cast long shadows across the yard. My view into the corn was limited, yet I heard it distinctly. A soft thud, the impact of something substantial meeting earth. My pulse leaped. Snatching a flashlight and pulling on boots, I stepped onto the porch, the night air feeling strangely dense. My legs were taut, breath coming in ragged bursts. The flashlight's beam sliced into the darkness, sweeping the field's edge. The nearest rows stirred, their movement unnaturally vigorous, as if disturbed by passage. "Hello?" I called out, my voice disappointingly tremulous. Is anyone out there?" Silence answered, save for a sudden gust that sent the corn into a frenzy of motion. I stood, frozen, uncertain. Then, a swift movement near the field's center. A flicker, a torsion. The scarecrow's silhouette seemed to wrench sideways. A vice clamped around my chest. Straining to hear above the wind and my own frantic breathing, I thought I detected a faint murmur, utterly indecipherable. The hand gripping the flashlight began to quiver uncontrollably. Then, abruptly, stillness fell, leaving only the sound of my own gasping breaths. I backed away, retreated into the house, bolted the door, and sank onto a kitchen chair, eyes fixed on the barrier between me and the night. Sleep was banished. I remained vigilant until dawn. With the first tentative fingers of light probing the windows, I rose, stiff-limbed and weary-eyed. The early air held a damp chill. Dew jeweled the corn leaves. I marched directly into the field, towards the central post. It seemed taller somehow, or perhaps it was merely the angle of the nascent light. The hat, unmistakably, was aimed my way. Its arms hung strangely, pulled downwards, limp. Straw extruded from rents in its side, the fabric seemingly torn open. The earth surrounding its base was freshly churned with shallow, dragging marks. Crouching, I touched one. A scuff, yes, but its maker remained elusive. A thorough search yielded nothing further. My heart felt leaden. I kept glancing at the scarecrow's face. The stitches secure in its mouth appeared slacker, the line gaping slightly. Stepping back, I stared, shook my head against the rising tide of dread, and retreated to the dubious sanctuary of the house. The day I devoted to strenuous chores, seeking distraction and physical labor, cleaning the barn, stacking remnant hay bales, sorting the inherited tools. Hours passed in a blur of exertion. A brief pause for sustenance, then back to work. It helped, dulled the edge of fear. But, as afternoon waned, the inevitability of nightfall and the presence lurking in the field returned with sickening force. The memory of my trembling flashlight beam spurred a decision. I would check the field again before sunset, seek confirmation of normalcy, however unlikely. With determined strides, projecting calm I did not feel, I walked out amongst the towering stalks, the sun still high enough to dapple the path. Upon reaching the center, I stopped dead. The scarecrow was pitched forward drastically, nearly detached from its post, as if arrested mid-descent. Its arms stretched forward imploringly. Fabric gaped at the shoulders. The rope binding it remained, yet hung slack. Fresh straw littered the ground beneath it. My throat constricted. Circling warily, maintaining distance, I observed its back. Long gashes, akin to deliberate cuts, marred the burlap. This was no simple decay. It looked violated. Straw poked out at bizarre angles. The frantic drumming of my own heart filled my ears. Sweat trickled down my spine. A primal urge to tear it down surged, yet I hesitated, plagued by uncertainty. Would dismantling it provoke something worse? The notion of a vagrant, skulking nocturnally, tampering with the effigy, offered a veneer of logic, more plausible, surely, than the alternative. Clinging to reason, I marched back to the barn, procured the sturdy rope, and returned. Methodically, grimly, I rebound the scarecrow to its stake, lashing torso and arms until the wood groaned under the tension. Stepping back, a sliver of relief penetrated the fear, a sense of regained control. A laugh escaped me, brittle and hollow in the quiet field. Night descended once more. The porch light cast a lonely circle of illumination. Near the back door, I placed a heavy flashlight and a hammer, meager defenses, yet better than none. Windows were latched, doors double-checked. Around 9, the wind rose. I steeled myself for the rustling. It began softly, familiarly, then escalated, growing into a clamorous roar. The porch light flickered erratically. Listening intently over the wind's howl, I discerned a different sound. A grating, scraping noise, as if something heavy were being dragged across the earth out there. Pressure built in my chest. Breathe. Stay calm. Moving to the window, I peered through a gap in the curtains. Corn stalks bent and swayed violently. The scarecrow's location, deep in the field's heart, was obscured from this vantage. I swallowed, my pulse rapid but steady. Then came the thud, identical to the one from the previous night. Flashlight in hand, I wrenched the door open and stepped onto the porch, leaving the entryway agape behind me. My boots felt leaden on the weathered planks. The beam carved a path into the first few rows. I advanced cautiously, the light dancing ahead. Corn stalks brushed against me, rustling like secrets on either side. Visibility extended mere feet into the darkness. My mouth was parched, every muscle coiled tight. A faint creaking reached me, the sound of rope under strain. Slowly, deliberately, I swept the flashlight beam across the suspected area. Movement flickered to my left. I snapped the light that way, only dancing stalks. Then, deeper in, I glimpsed the scarecrow's post, empty. The rope I had tied so firmly dangled from it, swaying gently, frayed ends adorned with clinging bits of straw. Ice water sluiced through my veins. 20 feet away, perhaps, movement again. A shape hunched low amongst the rows, indistinct in the gloom, obscured by the shifting stalks. I crept forward, step by agonizing step. The wind shrieked in my ears. My heartbeat hammered against my temples. My foot caught on unseen debris, pitching me forward. The flashlight beam spasmed wildly. By the time I regained balance, steadied the light, there was nothing. Only swaying corn. The rope on the post hung still. The urge to flee, to sprint back to the house, was overwhelming. Yet I forced myself to hold the light steady, scanning, searching. The shape was gone. My hands shook violently. "Who's out there?" I whispered, the sound cracking. Only the wind replied. Slowly, deliberately, I backed away, flashlight beam fixed on the inscrutable field. Once clear of the corn's edge, I turned and scrambled into the house, slamming and locking the door. Breath came in ragged gasps, hands slick with sweat, legs trembling beneath me. Extinguishing the lights, I took up a position at a window overlooking the field, concealed behind the curtain, peering into the oppressive darkness. Mostly, the corn stood quiescent, stirred only by intermittent gusts. The post remained starkly vacant. Hours crawled by. Occasional flickers of movement deep within the rows kept my nerves frayed. Wind or something else. My lungs felt constricted. Questions churned. Who? What? Why? Sleep never came. I sat in the living room, flashlight clutched like a talisman, ears straining against the silence for any aberration. The old house groaned, each creak a jolt to my system. As dawn painted the eastern sky, I returned to the window. In the gentle morning light, the field appeared deceptively ordinary. With hesitant steps, I ventured outside. The central post stood barren. Scraps of burlap lay scattered on the ground. The severed rope lay nearby, frayed and torn. Wisps of straw clung damply to corn leaves. The scarecrow itself had vanished. All that remained were these fragments and the old hat lying face down in the dirt. A fresh tear marred its brim. Bending, I picked it up. It felt wrong in my hand. Musty, the straw within cool and moist. My stomach churned. Footprints were absent, but the ground bore signs of disturbance, as if something had been dragged away. I remain here still, working this land, but vigilance is now my constant companion. No further trace of the scarecrow ever surfaced. Whether purloined by human hands or absconded of its own volition, I cannot say. The noises, the movements, the prints, they defy easy explanation. Trespassers engaged in elaborate pranks? Perhaps, yet no one has been seen skulking, nothing else disturbed. The image persists. That shape in the corn, hunched low, observing. Nights find me avoiding the field's edge. The feeling that something watched, and might watch again, is inescapable. Now, whenever the wind sighs through the rows, my heart seizes. Sometimes, standing on the porch, I scan the green labyrinth, half expecting to see that silhouette reappear. It hasn't. But the knot of tension in my gut remains. I don't know what resides out there amidst the corn. I have no intention of seeking it, especially not cloaked in darkness. Should it return, I suppose I will face it. Until then, I live with the echoes. The severed rope, the scattered straw, and the vacant space where a scarecrow once presided over my field. Solitude on asphalt ribbons threading through nocturnal emptiness. This was my sanctuary. The engine's low thrum a mantra, the obsidian cloak outside a comfort, the vacant path ahead an invitation to thoughtlessness. Yet, on this particular traverse down a forgotten highway vein, the familiar tranquility fractured, bleeding into a nascent terror. It began as twin pinpricks birthed in the rearview void. Distant, insignificant initially, another traveler swallowed by the night. Except these points of light refused the expected recession into perspective. They held station, luminous eyes mirroring my velocity, suspended in the black mirror at an unwavering interval. A subtle wrongness pricked at my senses. The dashboard glowed 2:13 a.m. Kilometers had unspooled without witness. No hamlets, no fuel stops, just unbroken desolation until this spectral pursuit. My knuckles whitened on the wheel, a counterpoint to the internal argument. Mere coincidence, cautious driving perhaps. Yet the non-disquiet persisted, a cold countercurrent to the engine's warmth. 10 minutes bled away, the interval between us inviolate. Not pursuit, not quite, but an unnerving, patient shadowing that felt chillingly deliberate. Enough paranoia. A test was needed. My foot depressed the accelerator, nudging the needle past the familiar highway rhythm, 70, 75 miles per hour. A fleeting sense of detachment, a widening gap, illusion. The twin stars behind swelled in brightness, effortlessly closing the distance I'd tried to create, resuming their precise, maddening formation. That's when certainty struck, cold and sharp as fractured ice. A visceral jolt. My pulse hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. Who navigated that phantom vehicle? What silent purpose propelled this relentless mimicry? The refusal to overtake screamed intention, not indifference. Ahead, only infinite asphalt unfurled into the gloom. A shiver traced my spine, cold despite the heater's breath. Escalation then, 80 miles per hour. Surely this velocity would break the spell, deter the follower. No. The lights surged, relentless, unwavering in their lockstep pacing. Subtlety abandoned, I slammed the pedal. The engine howled, scenery dissolving into streaks past 90. A desperate gamble for escape. Futile. Like tethered ghosts, they matched my frantic pace, their distance immutable, always present in the periphery of my fear. Panic seized me, a cold fist tightening in my chest. This wasn't chance encounters on a lonely road. This was deliberate, targeted pursuit. But the motive remained terrifyingly obscure. Options evaporated. The highway offered no sanctuary, no turnoffs, no flickering sign of civilization. My phone, clutched in a sweaty palm, displayed only mocking emptiness. No signal bars pierced this wilderness. Utter isolation pressed in. Desperation clawed. Stop. Invite confrontation. What horrors might unfold if I yielded the road, braked into stillness. My imagination, fueled by adrenaline, conjured monstrous possibilities, each more chilling than the last. Then, the impossible. Abruptly, the pursuing lumens extinguished. One moment, they burned into my mirror, twin accusations in the dark. The next, utter blackness reigned behind me. I blinked, reflexively easing off the gas, my gaze sweeping the now empty expanse. Nothing? Had fatigue and fear conjured a hallucination? A trick of strained nerves playing on the canvas of night? No. The memory was too vivid, the chase too prolonged, the fear too real and visceral. They had been there. Now, inexplicably, they were not. My speed moderated, the engine's frantic whine subsiding to a tense hum. My heart, though, still beat a frantic tattoo against my ribs. 2:30 a.m. glowed on the dash. Had they veered onto some unseen track? Vanished into the ether itself? The physics felt wrong, the suddenness inexplicable. A fragile calm attempted to settle, yet the unease remained, a cold residue clinging to my thoughts. Just endure, I told myself. It's finished. Then, a blinding resurgence. They were back. Not distant stars now, but blazing suns, searingly close, filling my entire rearview mirror with hostile light. My breath hitched. Tremors ran through my hands, clutching the wheel. How? No warning, no approach, just instantaneous presence, practically fused to my bumper. I instinctively jolted the wheel. They mirrored the movement, glued fast, an inescapable predator. Their beams, invasive and overwhelming, bleached the world around me. Panic, raw and suffocating, surged anew. This defied all logic, all natural law. A sudden surge from behind, metal threatening metal. My heart vaulted into my throat as I wrenched the wheel, tires screaming in protest on the asphalt, narrowly averting impact. The glare intensified, intolerably bright, annihilating my vision in a painful whiteout. And then, gone, again, utterly, instantly. My foot slammed the brake, the car fishtailing slightly on the tarmac as momentum bled away. I scanned the darkness behind, frantic, wild-eyed. Void, silence. Nothing remained but the echo of terror. Uncontrollable tremors racked my hands, my chest ached with constricted fear. What sorcery was this? A vehicle materializing and dematerializing at will? Twice? I sat frozen for a beat, the engine idling, desperate for breath, for reason. None came. Delay courted further terror. I stomped the accelerator, launching the car forward, devouring the miles with renewed urgency. My eyes flicked compulsively to the mirror, anticipating the spectral return with every beat of my pounding heart. But the obsidian ribbon behind remained unblemished, desolate, as if the preceding hour had been nothing more than a fever dream spun from darkness and speed. Only when the fluorescent halo of a lonely, isolated gas station bloomed ahead did I dare slow down, pulling in under its stark, humming sanctuary, hands still quivering. I cut the engine and sat enveloped by the sudden, profound silence, the adrenaline slowly receding, leaving behind a residue of icy dread and questions that echoed unanswered in the hollow chambers of the night. Some elaborate, cruel hoax, or an encounter with something fundamentally inexplicable, something that operates outside the known rules. I possess no answers, only the chilling certainty that the darkness on that particular highway holds secrets I will never again venture near after sundown. A tremor began in my knuckles, a vibration born not of the ancient Toyota's engine, but of something deeper, colder. The dashboard clock glowed a sickly green. 2:17 a.m. Highway 17 unfolded before me, a ribbon of asphalt swallowed by the vast, indifferent darkness 40 miles shy of Concord, New Hampshire. Nothing flanked the road. No farmhouses, no welcoming porch lights, just the twin beams of my headlights punching a futile hole in the night and the faint luminescence of the instrument panel. 6 hours I'd been driving, retreating from a spectacularly failed venture in Quebec City. Static had claimed the radio an hour back, leaving only the drone of worn tires on pavement and the agitated rattle of my thermos in its holder. Then the rearview mirror reflected more than just receding road. At first, a trick of profound exhaustion, I thought. A smudge on the periphery of vision. Some amorphous shape pacing my Camry, perhaps 50 feet astern. Not running, not precisely. It slid, a frictionless glide across the tarmac, its motion unnervingly fluid, impossibly swift for anything terrestrial. I blinked, scrubbing my eyes, but the focus sharpened. It was closer now, 30 feet. My foot found the accelerator, urging the reluctant engine. The speedometer needle crept past 65, nudged 70, strained towards 75. A high whine emanated from beneath the hood. The shape maintained its distance with insolent ease. Caught in the crimson wash of my taillights, details began to coalesce. It possessed the bulk of a mastiff, yet any comparison to earthly fauna ended there. Its form was void dark, an absolute absorption of light, a mobile patch of oblivion. The edges seemed unstable, blurring and reforming like smoke in a fickle breeze. No eyes registered, no discernible features, just that mass, that presence shadowing my flight. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat audible in my own ears. A rivulet of sweat traced a path down my spine, plastering my shirt to the worn fabric of the seat. 80, 85. The steering wheel shuddered violently, the old Toyota protesting speeds it was never designed to endure. The entity matched me, stride for impossible stride, 20 feet. The mirror framed it now, a sight my mind recoiled from processing. Its surface undulated, slick and volatile as spilled crude oil. Appendages. Were they tentacles, limbs? Would occasionally writhe out from the core darkness, only to melt seamlessly back into the hole. Instinctively, I fumble for my phone on a passenger seat, predictably barren. No signal, no bars. Just the crushing isolation of rural New Hampshire, the dead of night, and a pursuer torn from nightmare. Ahead, the highway curved sharply. I took it too fast, heard the tires scream in protest, felt the sickening lurch of lost traction. For a heart-stopping instant, I fought the skid, wrestling the wheel. When I dared glance back, it was closer still, 15 feet. Logic clawed its way through the panic. Half a tank of fuel remained. The next town, Haven Wood. The sign had flashed by miles ago. 20 miles? Could the Camry hold out? The distance shrank relentlessly. 10 feet. My palms were slick, treacherous on the wheel. I swiped them frantically on my jeans. One, then the other. Eyes darting between the road ahead and the horror reflected behind. 90 miles per hour. The car bucked, a frantic shudder running through its frame. Warning lights blinked accusingly on the dash. The engine temperature climbing into the red. Another look. It was practically fused to my bumper, close enough to perceive the fundamental wrongness of its being. Its movement defied all known physics, flowing like liquid shadow, yet retaining a cohesive, malevolent form. A solid impact rocked the car. A hideous scraping followed like giant claws dragged across metal. A raw scream tore from my throat, pure, primal terror. I stomped the accelerator to the floor. The engine screamed, a tortured, grinding shriek. The needle quivered past 95. The entire vehicle vibrated as if ready to disintegrate. A constellation of warning icons now blazed. Check engine, oil pressure, temperature, all flashing crimson alarms. A second impact, harder, sent the car slewing sideways. I fought for control, knuckles white. In the mirror, a portion of the darkness surged upwards, flowing over the trunk lid like viscous black syrup defying gravity. A tendril of it, impossibly thin, reached for the rear window. In desperation, I did the only thing left. I slammed on the brakes. Physics asserted its brutal authority. The car's nose plunged downwards. Tires shrieked in agony. The seatbelt bit savagely into my chest. Loose objects became projectiles. Thermos, phone, scattered remnants of my failed business proposal. Through the rear window, distorted by my own panicked reflection, I saw the dark mass overshoot my vehicle, propelled forward by its own momentum and my sudden deceleration. It hung suspended for a microsecond, impossibly elongated, twisting in shapes that bruised the eyes. Then it struck the asphalt ahead and ruptured, splattering like an overfilled bladder. No time for assessment. I wrenched the wheel, spinning the tortured Camry a full 180 degrees, leaving arcs of burnt rubber on the pavement. Facing the direction I'd come, I floored the accelerator once more. The engine coughed, sputtered, protesting violently. Steam billowed from under the hood, thick and white. The temperature gauge was pegged deep in the red zone, but it moved. I pushed it, extracting every last ounce of dying momentum. In the rearview mirror, the impossible was happening. The scattered blackness on the road ahead was coalescing, drawing itself back together like spilled mercury reforming into a perfect sphere. It solidified, and then it moved again, resuming the pursuit. The Toyota was dying beneath me. Black smoke now joined the steam, pouring from the engine bay. The steering wheel shook so intensely I could barely maintain my grip. But salvation shimmered ahead, the diffuse glow of distant lights. A town, a service station, anything. Anything but this consuming darkness. It gained ground with terrifying speed, seeming enraged now. 50 feet, 40, 30. A sound like a cannon shot erupted from the engine. More lights flashed. Power bled away rapidly. 20 feet. Havenwood's lights beckoned, agonizingly close, yet impossibly far. The engine sputtered its death rattle. The car decelerated, coasting now. 15 feet. 10. A wet, dragging sound scraped along the asphalt behind me, the sound of sodden flesh pulled over stone. 5 feet. Silence. The engine expired completely. Power steering vanished. I wrestled the heavy wheel, trying to keep the car rolling straight towards the lights, maybe half a mile distant. In the mirror, the creature swelled, rising behind my crippled car like a monstrous dark wave poised to crash. Then, my fading headlights illuminated a reflective sign. Welcome to Havenwood. Speed limit 35. Beyond it, tangible structures, buildings, streetlights, the stark fluorescent glare of a 24-hour gas station slicing through the gloom. The pursuing darkness halted, abruptly, as if it had collided with an invisible barrier. While my Camry coasted into the town's meager pool of light, I watched, transfixed, as the entity seemed to implode, collapsing inward, shrinking rapidly until it was merely a point of utter blackness on the highway. Then, that too vanished, extinguished like a snuffed candle flame. My car rolled to a final stop just inside the town limits, engine utterly defunct, steam pouring from its ruined heart, the dashboard a constellation of dire warnings. But I was breathing, alive. I sat there, enveloped by the sudden, profound silence, shaking uncontrollably, waiting for the frantic pounding in my chest to subside. Headlights approached. Early commuters, oblivious, cocooned in their ordinary lives, unaware of the horrors that prowled the unlit veins of the world. When my legs felt capable of supporting me, I exited the vehicle. The rear of the Camry was savaged. Deep gouges were raked into the metal, unnervingly like claw marks. The trunk lid was concave, warped. The bumper hung precariously, half detached. Tangible proof. It had been real. I walked the remaining distance to the gas station, the fluorescent lights humming overhead like artificial angels. I called for a tow. The mechanic who arrived surveyed the damage, a low whistle escaping his lips. "Tangle with a moose?" he inquired. "Something like that," I managed. He drove me into Havenwood proper. I found a motel, checked in, and fell into a heavy, dreamless sleep that lasted well past noon. Upon waking, I sought out the local library. Hours spent sifting through brittle newspaper archives and town histories yielded whispers, fragmented accounts, old legends concerning inexplicable pursuits on that desolate stretch of Highway 17, tales of vanishings, cars found abandoned. Most were dismissed as folklore, attributed to fatigue or alcohol. I knew the chilling truth now. I knew what waited out there. The Camry was towed to a larger garage back near Concord. The diagnosis was terminal. Thrown rod, cracked engine block, melted pistons. Repair costs dwarf the car's value. I bought a newer model, faster. Sometimes I drive that section of Highway 17 again, but only under the full glare of the sun. Never after dusk, never unaccompanied. And my eyes constantly flick to the mirrors, scanning for that fluid silhouette, that impossible velocity. Some nights I bolt upright in bed, drenched in cold sweat, convinced I see it coalescing in the shadows of my room. But it respects boundaries, it seems. It avoids the light, the populated places. It remains, though, haunting that lonely road, patient, waiting for the next solitary traveler navigating the nocturnal void, the next soul ignorant of what truly owns the night. The thought of reporting it flickers, then dies. The police, state authorities, paranormal investigators, the words themselves sound insane. A sentient shadow is hunting vehicles on Highway 17. They'd offer a sobriety test, perhaps a psychiatric referral. So the knowledge remains locked inside, a heavy secret. I offer veiled warnings when I can. Avoid that road after dark. Most chuckle, dismiss it. I understand. I was once like them. The Concord mechanic finished the modifications on my new car last week. Enhanced horsepower, an upgraded cooling system, a reinforced rear bumper. Precautions, because a cold certainty resides within me. Someday, necessity or fate will compel me onto that highway after dark again. When that day comes, I intend to be better prepared. The scars remain on my old Toyota, rusting away in some anonymous junkyard. The mechanic offered cosmetic repairs, but I refused. I keep the photographs on my phone. Evidence, a talisman against encroaching doubt. Because sometimes, in the quiet solitude of the late hours, memory softens, blurs. Perhaps it was exhaustion, a wakened nightmare born of stress and sleeplessness. Then I look at the pictures, at those deep, impossible furrows torn into solid steel, and I remember the thing in my mirror, flowing across the asphalt like liquid night. I remember the sound, that wet, dragging horror. I remember its movement, too swift, too smooth, utterly wrong. And I know, it was real. It is still out there. So, if your journey ever takes you down Highway 17 outside Concord, late when the world sleeps, and you perceive something dark gaining in your rearview mirror, something gliding with unnatural grace, do not hesitate. Do not rationalize. Accelerate. Drive towards the nearest sanctuary of light as if your soul depended on it, and offer a silent prayer that your engine is strong, your speed sufficient. Because the thing behind you, it learns, it adapts, and it is eternally hungry. I know, I escaped. Others became statistics, missing persons, abandoned vehicles, explanations that conveniently ignore the impossible. But I know what claimed them. I know what waits in the lonely dark, and now you do too. Remember the warning. Stay off Highway 17 at night. Choose the brighter path, because once that darkness begins its pursuit, the ending is binary. You reach the light, as I did, or you join the silent collection of empty cars on an empty road. The choice, ultimately, is yours. Just don't claim ignorance. The stadium exhaled its last cheer hours ago, leaving behind a cavernous silence that swallowed the echoes of departed crowds. My flashlight beam cut a lonely swathe through the gloom as I walked my patrol route, a disquiet prickling beneath my skin. Something felt dissonant tonight. Perhaps it was the way shadows writhed just beyond the edge of my vision, or the phantom whispers that seemed to coil within the nocturnal breeze. Whatever the source, this shift already felt steeped in an unfamiliar tension. I'm Leo. For 3 years, the graveyard watch at Crestwood Arena has been my territory. It lacks prestige, certainly, but it keeps the lights on. Usually, the hours pass in quiet companionship with the custodial crew and the occasional feral feline scavenging for scraps. But this night vibrated with a different frequency. The shift began around the stroke of midnight. During a routine sweep of the perimeter, a van snagged my attention, hunkered down in the far reaches of the E-lot, an unremarkable sight in itself, except it hadn't occupied that space an hour prior. I keyed my radio, contacting Ray, my counterpart ensconced in the surveillance hub. "Ray, you clocking that van, Section E?" Static hissed briefly before his voice emerged, tinny and distant. "Affirmative, Leo. Got eyes on it. Static, no activity. Want me to hold focus?" "Yeah, appreciate it. Going to get a closer look." I moved with deliberate quiet, my hand instinctively finding the reassuring weight of the taser holstered at my hip. Drawing nearer, the van revealed its dilapidated state, its original white surrendered to a grimy pallor, rust blooming like diseased flowers along its seams. The windows, impenetrably tinted, offered no glimpse within. Just as my knuckles hovered near the glass, muffled voices drifted from behind the stadium structure. Instinct flared, and I melted behind the bulk of a parked sedan, ears straining against the quiet. "Certain this is the spot?" one voice queried, low and gravelly. "Positive," a second voice affirmed. "Security's threadbare, prize is substantial. Just need to slip past the watchers." My pulse hammered against my ribs. This wasn't the usual post-game straggler or teenagers seeking illicit thrills. This carried the weight of serious intent. I radioed Ray again, my voice barely a whisper. "Ray, situation developing. Multiple hostiles plan an entry. Alert PD. Tell them quiet approach. Kill the sirens." "God, Leo, you sure about this?" "Positive. Just make the call." Edging closer to the source of the voices, I navigated the parking lot's dim geometry, seeking visual confirmation. 3 silhouettes materialized near a service entrance, huddled in conspiratorial intimacy. One figure manipulated the lock mechanism while the other 2 maintained vigilant stances. A faint, metallic click punctuated the stillness, and the service door yielded inward. The trio vanished into the stadium's guts, leaving me with a stark choice: await backup or pursue. Prudence screamed wait, yet the specter of disabled cameras or a breached safe before the police arrived spurred me onward. A deep inhalation, a decision made. I slipped inside, my bootsteps unnaturally loud in the deserted concourse. Ahead, their hushed conversation caromed off the concrete vastness. Their trajectory was clear. The administrative wing, repository of the arena's safe. Rounding a corner, I caught a fleeting image. 3 men clad in dark attire, burdened with duffel bags. A handgun glinted, tucked into the waistband of one. My throat tightened. The situation had escalated far beyond my pay scale, yet retreat felt impossible now. Maintaining a shadow distance, I trailed them. They reached the targeted office, commencing their assault on its lock. Another radio transmission, urgent and low. They're at the main admin office, ETA on backup. 5 minutes out, Ray's strained whisper returned. Leo, watch yourself, man. The lock yielded with another soft click. They were inside. I crept forward, positioning myself just outside the open doorway. Sounds of frantic searching emanated, drawers wrenched open, papers rustling, frustrated mutters. Has to be in here, one growled. Try behind the landscape painting, another suggested. A scraping noise, followed by a low, triumphant chuckle. Bingo! My stomach plummeted. The safe. Delay was no longer an option. Drawing another steadying breath, I stepped into the threshold. Taser held high, its low hum seeming to fill the suddenly charged air. Freeze! Security! They spun, surprise momentarily paralyzing their features. An instant of tableau, then chaos erupted. One lunged, a blur of motion, while another fumbled for his weapon. My taser discharged, its probes finding purchase on the charging man's chest. He collapsed, twitching violently. The gunman now had his weapon free, its dark eye leveled squarely at me. Time seemed to decelerate. I saw the knuckle whiten on the trigger, imagined the percussive impact. Before the shot could break the tension, a shattering noise erupted from the corridor behind me. The office flooded with blinding flashlight beams and authoritative shouts. The cavalry, finally. Police, drop your weapons! The ensuing moments dissolved into a controlled whirlwind. The remaining 2 intruders were swiftly overwhelmed, wrestled into handcuffs. I found myself deposited in a chair, recounting the night's events to a detective while paramedics performed a cursory check. As the adrenaline tide receded, the stark reality washed over me. I'd walked into the crosshairs of a professional heist, nearly paying the ultimate price. The detective, a weathered man named Harding with eyes that missed nothing, regarded me with a complex blend of respect and exasperation. You took a hellacious gamble, son, but because of it, we bagged these clowns red-handed, part of a ring hitting venues up and down the coast. Still slightly numb, I managed to nod. Just doing my job, detective. Harding offered a gruff chuckle. Your job just cracked a case we've been chasing for months. Take pride in that. Later, as the official commotion subsided and dawn began to paint the eastern sky, I stood in the emptying parking lot. Ray materialized beside me, clapping a heavy hand on my shoulder. You're either the gutsiest or the damnedest fool I know, he declared, shaking his head. Not sure I'd have had the stones for what you pulled. A faint smile touched my lips. Honestly, Ray, Not sure I'd do it again, but right then, it felt like the only move. He nodded, a flicker of understanding in his gaze. Glad you're intact. And hey, maybe Brass throws a promotion your way. We shared a brief, tension-easing laugh. The drive home was a montage of replayed moments. The creeping fear, the surge of adrenaline, the chilling finality of the confrontation. I'd always viewed myself as an ordinary man in an ordinary role, but for one extraordinary night, I'd been something else. I'd tilted the scales. The fear, the risk, the unexpected victory. It was all seared into my consciousness now. Henceforth, every shadow in the stadium's depths would hold a latent menace, every stray sound a potential echo of danger. Pulling into my driveway, physically drained but strangely invigorated, a realization settled. I could live with that new awareness, because I now understood my own capacity. When pressed to the edge, I hadn't folded. As I collapsed into bed, sunlight streaming boldly through the window, a quiet satisfaction bloomed. Tonight had irrevocably altered me, and for whatever lay ahead, I felt strangely prepared. Sometimes, in the deepest folds of the night, long after the world has gone quiet, unlikely heroes emerge, and tonight, however briefly, I had been one.